Howdy folks, we're going to go to our next topic for solving quadratic equations. This time I'm going to show you a really simple concept called solving quadratic equations by extracting square roots. Now, the first step in any quadratic equation is to set one side equal to 0. But there are times when you could actually, if you come down to x squared, just x squared in a number, or you have a factor squared and a number, you can actually put the squared factor on one side. So let's say that you have x squared minus 7 equals 0. Let's say this is what you come up with. Now you could actually solve this by factoring by using a difference of squares. But let me show you an alternative method. What you can do is leave the squared factor by itself on the left, and we're going to add 7 to both sides. Now we get x squared is equal to 7. Now, as long as the number on the other side of the equal sign, as long as that number is a positive number, then you can use the technique that I'm about to show you. Basically, what you're going to do here is you're simply going to take the square root of both sides. We have x squared is equal to 7. Take the square root of both sides, and you get, well, the square root of x squared is x. Now on the other side, when we take the square root of a number, we need to say either plus or minus that number, plus or minus the square root of 7. Let me show you why. Because if we say that x squared is equal to 9, if we plug in a 3, isn't 3 squared equal to 9? Yes. But isn't negative 3 squared also equal to 9? Isn't negative 3 times negative 3 also equal to 9? And so therefore, x can be plus or minus 3. So we have to put this plus or minus when we do the square root. We do the square root of x on one side, and then the square root of a number on the other side, and it has to be plus or minus that number. So what if we did this one in the last video, what if we had x squared minus 25 equals 0? Instead of using factoring, let's extract square roots. Okay? I'm going to add 25 to both sides, and I'm going to have x squared is equal to 25. Because this is positive, I can extract the square root. So I'm going to do the square root of this side and the square root of this side. The square root of x squared is x. Square root of 25 is 5, but because I did a square root, I have to do plus or minus. What that means is that there are two answers. X is equal to positive 5 and x is equal to negative 5. Okay? Let's do a couple more examples so you can really get at this extracting square roots idea. What if we had x squared was equal to 14? Let's say x squared is equal to 14. Why don't you pause the video and take less than a minute and solve this, okay? All right, so hopefully what you did was you just had to write this down and then do the square root here and the square root here, giving you x equals plus or minus the square root of 14, meaning that x is equal to positive square root of 14 and x is equal to negative square root of 14. And you're done. Let's just do a couple more. One more that you'll do on your own, and then I want to show you one more interesting technique. Let's say that we have x squared is equal to 169. Now that's a perfect square, so I'm going to see if you can figure out what the perfect square is. But go ahead and pause the video and do this one. Okay, so let's hope that when you did yours, you went ahead and did the square root of this side and the square root of this side. The square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 169 is 13. And because we did a square root, it has to be plus or minus that number. So x, one answer for x is negative 13, and the other answer for x is positive 13. All right, let me show you another technique now. Well, it's still extracting square roots, but it's another application of extracting square roots. What if we had a binomial squared, like x minus 4 squared, but not just that. We had x minus 4 squared minus, it's got to be minus. X minus 4 squared minus 3 equals 0, okay? Well, you can actually use the extracting square roots on a binomial that is squared if you want to. It doesn't have to just be x squared. It can be any factor that is squared. So we're going to add 3 to both sides, okay? And we're going to have x minus 4 squared equals 3. Because this whole binomial is squared, we can take the square root of it. So we're going to do the square root here and the square root here. Well, the square root of x minus 4 squared is x minus 4. It's just going to cancel the square in the parentheses. So now, instead of having 2x minus 4s, we have 1x minus 4. Square root of 3 is the square root of 3, and we're going to make it plus or minus. But we're not done yet, actually. We don't want to know what x minus 4 is. We want to know what x is. So we're going to add 4 here, and we're going to add 4 here. It's going to cancel here, and x is going to be equal to 4, and then plus or minus the square root of 3. This will actually give us 2 answers. One answer is x equals 4 plus the square root of 3. The other answer is x equals 4 minus the square root of 3, and those are our 2 answers. Now, I'm going to put another one just like this up on the board, and I want you to try and figure it out on your own, okay? And then you may want to look back at this example to try and figure out how to do that one. Let's say that we had, and I want to add a little trick to it, maybe a little bit of a trick. Let's say that we have x plus 3 squared minus 49 is equal to 0. Okay? All right, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure this one out. All right, so I hope the first thing you did was add 49 to both sides. And now we have x plus 3 squared equals 49. And now, because the left side is a squared factor, we can take the square root there, and we'll take the square root over here, right? That'll cancel the square and leave us with just x plus 3. Now, the square root of 49 is actually 7. So we're going to put a 7 here, and because we did a square root, what do we have to put? It's 2 answers. We've got to put a plus and a minus. So we've got to put plus or minus 7. Now we're going to subtract 3 from both sides, and what we're going to get is x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 7, which is 2 answers. One of them is x equals negative 3 plus 7. The other one is x equals negative 3 minus 7. So here's the trick. Because they're both whole numbers, we can combine them. We don't have to stop here. What is negative 3 plus 7? It's 4. So x is equal to 4 is one answer. And what's negative 3 minus 7? Well, that's negative 10. So x is equal to negative 10. So we have our answers. X equals 4 and x equals negative 10. And that is how you solve a quadratic equation, by extracting square roots.